I was born in a small town in UP, a place called Ghaziabad.
And if you think back on your early childhood years, what do you remember?
You know, Ghaziabad is very close to Delhi, which is a big capital. And for me, the larger family was in Delhi. And the contrast between a small town and a big town was something that I saw every weekend because we would travel into Delhi. But my relatives or some of the friends over a period of time would always hesitate to come to Ghaziabad. And that's a question that, you know, in my own mind, I used to try and answer that where is the divide? Because the distance is the same. If I travel to Delhi, it's 25 kilometers, and anybody from Delhi travels to Ghaziabad, it's 25 kilometers. But till date, I think there is some gap as to how we see travel.
So there's something attractive about Delhi that, for all people. And if I could just kind of ask you, when you went to the city environment, what did you look at? What did you like a lot?
Actually, I like to describe myself still as a very small town person with a very small town mentality, right? Because what I am today is largely shaped by me being in Ghaziabad and not so much by me traveling to Delhi. So for me, my approach towards work and life is still very, very small towns, whether it is work-life balance, whether it is about having friends where you don't have to necessarily make an appointment to meet up. Those are the values that I live by. I think large town was, to my mind, was all around scale and how things in a large town happen. So, how do you get such wide roads, and how do you get roads that are clean, and how do you get the traffic to move? Because in a small town, things happen quite informally. So, to me, that was a very interesting contrast. Second, I think as we grew up, and especially in my formative years, distribution was another contrast, because a lot of things were available in Delhi, and therefore reason to going to Delhi, when you say Delhi, a large town being attractive, I think it was a lot to do with the fact that there were things available in a large town that were not available in small town. But when I travel back home, that divide is no more there. So all the multinational brands or all the domestic global brands or services are today available in Ghaziabad, and when I talk to my friends back home, they don't travel to Delhi as often. So I think the distribution contrast was very, very visible, if you ask me, back those days.
And also, study-wise, subject-wise, what fascinated you during the early years?
Wasn't really a brilliant student in academics, so to speak. However, there was a trigger when I was finishing my school. My class teacher moved 2 houses away from me, and they had a son who's one of my best buddies today. And I had a chance meeting with him, and he asked me, so how do you stay out of home so long? And I asked him, how do you study so long? And we decided to give each other a chance. So we decided to spend an hour together, and he was kind of a geek, and therefore he wasn't much of a social animal, and I guess I was always out of home, so I wasn't much of a geek, and I was only a social animal. So as they say, opposite attract. So that really was a changing point in my life in terms of how I looked at academics. So that happened when I was in my 11th grade. From there on, of course, role of academics, role of studying, so to speak, started becoming a little more clearer, and the fact that there is a purpose to it started becoming apparent to me. It took me a little bit of time because I didn't score very well in my 12th standard, and I had to study in a college in Ghaziabad. But I think sense of purpose was a lot clearer. Therefore, I did reasonably well, even though I was studying in a local college.
What do you do now?
Well, as a professional, I'm part of this group which is pretty large. They have they're into multiple businesses: energy, retail, steel, shipping, mining. It's a group that has over a $30 billion top line, targeting to be $50 billion top line. I primarily do 3 things, if you ask me. One is that I head up all the retail businesses, which is more like a new business in the emerging economy of India. So there are multiple verticals that I look after. I also am involved with on the steel business. I'm the global strategy head for the steel business. So that's a pretty large business for us, about a $7 billion top line. And in addition, the way the group is structured, I also get involved in some of the group imperatives, because the group is transitioning into a new league, and the attempt is to co-create a lot of what happens in the group around people, policies, and around how we see our global footprint. So I pretty much work through these 3 work areas, so to speak.
To summarize it, it sounds like you've got one huge amount of things that you have to do that require a lot more than simple knowledge. I mean, you've got to be really good at what you do. So I ask you, you didn't do well in school, and yet you have this type of role. What happened in that interim to get you here?
To me, it's just about attitude. I think attitude to learn fast, and learn accurate. I think that's extremely important. If the hunger to learn comes down, then I think you kind of stagnate or you reach your point of competence. So, if I was to describe my journey, it's been built around curiosity. It's been built around. It's not been built around I need to be somewhere at some point of time. It's been built around, okay, this seems interesting, let's get to know more about it. My background is FMCG, so for me to now look at steel business, a lot of people ask me this question. So steel, you looked at services, you looked at FMCG, I mean steel, and I keep saying there are 4 basic principles in any business. How do you drive your top line? How do you keep your costs in control? How do you create sustainable profitability? And how do you build a world-class organization? So it doesn't matter what business you are in. Of course, every industry, every organization has its own unique points. But if you simplify it, then you say, all right, to do this, what is that I need to learn about this business? To be able to achieve all this, what is that I need to know? And I think it's all about asking the right questions. And more often than not, you'll find there's an answer out there, and somebody didn't perhaps give it that level of importance or that level of attention that it deserves. So I like to live life with very simple rules. I'm very focused on work-life balance. I enjoy my golf. I have a family, two boys and a wife, and I think that's a struggle, but I think so far so good. And the message that I give out to a lot of my friends and colleagues, I think who work harder than I do and smarter than I do, is that work-life balance is possible and it's required. So,
if you think back on just the lessons I just heard, in college, was it 1% or 99% developed at that time, or what did you do in those formative years to get the qualities that you're taking kind of for granted right now, but they're exceptional qualities?
I find it a little difficult to put it in words, but I would say just being a little more aware and sensitive as to what are the new things happening in your environment, and wanting to know about it, and those and if those are interesting, to get engaged with them. So I remember ATMs happened in India, and I used to see these little blocks of ATM, and at that point of time I didn't have a bank account, and it was a fascinating thing. You could put in a card and take out money. So I talked to my dad and said, I need a bank account. So he said, what will you do with a bank account? So I didn't tell him that. I said, no, I want to start a saving account. But just the whole thing, how does this whole ATM work? How do you put card in, the money comes out? So small things. And when I remember in 1999, till 1998, Indian credit cards, you could only do domestic transaction and in Nepal. In 1999, for the first time, you could do it. And I had my first son in 1999, and I was in London, and I went to Disney store and actually gave my card. I bought a little teddy bear for him, and it took that 2 seconds for the approval, and I said, damn thing is not going to work. But finally when the printer, so I think these are small things, but for me, that here we come a long way. And how does the whole process work? I think it's as simple as that. You have to constantly stay engaged with what's happening in and around you. So to me, I feel that for me has worked very well.
Okay. And when you started your professional career, what type of work did you get in the beginning?
Well, I worked for a real small organization. I mean, by today's standard, it was it had maybe a $9 million top line, and today I handle a portfolio which is roughly $7 or $8 billion. So it's a massive kind of increase. But numbers honestly have never intimidated me, or I think it's about you got to play the game, as I say. So when I started my career, it was a really small organization, and I was in sales, and it was a company that was engaged in selling automotive equipment, and I looked after B2B sales, and I looked after government sales. So that was my start. That's how I started. So I used to spend 20 days on road, um, talking to customers and trying to pick up business.
But what I hear nowadays for MBAs especially is that, you know, many of them don't want to go to sales because they think that's not the way to get started. It's, you know, you can't use your head.
Well, I think that's true, but I think organizations are equally to take the share for this because the way our programs are designed, somewhere in our own mind, we believe that kids out of a management institute are the strategy guys, and therefore, perhaps we have not done enough to attract talent in sales. And I have built some wonderful relationships over the last 20-25 years that I've been working, of kids from some of the best institutes who have come up through sales. So I think it's a mixed bag, but you know, somewhere it's as much an industry failure not to make sales attractive. At Essar, by design, by policy, 70% of MBA have to go through the sales team and vice versa.
And if you look at the progress after your first series of work, you know, did you feel that you were on a slow track, fast track? You know, people, some people making X number of lakhs a year, others not making as much, and all those type of things happen in the beginning. But how do you know you're on the right track?
I think two things. I came from a small town. I didn't have too much of. I didn't have too many needs. So you know my salary needs to grow by a certain percentage or a certain volume. For the first 8-10 years, it really didn't matter. It was about doing well, right? Because you just didn't have avenues to spend money, and you know, 500 rupees saving at the end of the month was very, very big money, a very large amount of money. I owe a lot to where I am to some of the wonderful bosses that I've had. In my first company, I had a boss, Mr. C.P. Kohli. He was an ITI diploma holder, and he was a general manager, and those general managers are like equivalent of today's chief operating officers. And as I became, I was a management trainee, and after 6 months I got confirmed as an assistant manager sale, and suddenly I realized that people with a lot more experience were reporting into me, and they were obviously elder to me, and I come from middle income background, come from a small town, and you know, culturally you were to respect age, and I was uncomfortable with people elder to me walking into a little cubicle that I had, and therefore I would often go and sit with them. But so at a point in time, I took this up Mr. Kohli, and I said, you know, I just want to understand what went wrong, because they have far more experience than I have. I'm just about a year out of college and you know, working. So what makes me so special, or what went wrong with them? And he told me in very simple words that look, for you to grow consistently, there's a very simple rule. First, you must know your job, because if you don't know your job, you don't deserve it. Second, you must know your subordinate's job. If you don't know your subordinate's job, you don't deserve to be a boss. But more importantly, you must know your boss's job. Only when you know your boss's job will the organization say, here is a guy who seems to know what it takes in the next role. You know, we constantly talk about, you know, finding a successor, and the grooming that he gave us was, you need to define your own destination. You need to define that if you want to go to a certain position, then what are you doing to groom yourself up? And I think that was a wonderful piece of advice which I got early on in my career. And I didn't understand really the value of this advice, to be honest. In the first 2 or 3 years, it was like, you know, the boss said so. But you know, life offers you opportunities, and it gives you interesting touch points, so to speak. When I switched my first job and I moved to another organization, my boss fell sick. He had jaundice, and those days jaundice was like 3 to 6 months. So there was a natural void where I didn't have a boss, and I had not prepared myself for my boss's role. And you know, these words kind of just flashed through my mind, and I said, only if I had kind of thought through this, I would have been more prepared. So I started to believe in this mantra, and I've lived by this mantra now for the last 20 years. So every role that I've done, it is not about doing that role well, but it's also about what's the next role, and where is the leadership gap, where is the skill gap, what's the attitudinal gap, and how you're going to work on it. So I think feedbacking becomes very critical, and I have I've had the privilege of going to some of the best institutions in the country and outside. I went for my MP to Harvard, and again it was a very humbling experience because you're a class of 80, people who are extremely successful. So that really has been the mantra, to be honest, that you keep on looking out what's your next, pretty much like you were talking about yourself, that you decided to come back and help somebody. So that's the next role for you, and then you have to start preparing towards it. So I think that really has worked so far, that's sure.
What we are recognizing after talking to people such as Dr. Mashelkar and many people that follow this for a living every day, India needs innovators, but these innovations have to be commercially realizable and successful before they can really impact the country, especially the people that can't afford many of the things that the upper strata can today. So with that assumption, we're looking at how we take student projects and other people, alumni projects and other people's projects, and making them commercially realizable. Can you tell me from your vantage point, somebody comes to you with a new product idea, okay, let's say in retail as a service or as a product, or anything else, or even as a derivative of the any industry that you want to talk about, what type of questions do you want to ask them to say, this looks good, this really is worth my time?
Sure. Happy.
Okay, what type of questions, if somebody approaches you, okay, and says, I built this wireless sensor-based product that can look at water and give a green, orange, or red light to see if it's drinkable or not.
Right. To start with, first of all, innovation has become, pardon my saying so, a very sexy word, and therefore it often gets used very loosely. I think there are a couple of things that I would want to know before I really classify an idea as a possible innovation. First of is that what's the fundamental insight which forms the backbone of that idea? Extremely important. Therefore, you are answering issues of relevance. So, if there is a box that shows a light and says the water is drinkable, it sounds like an idea, but I want to know what's the fundamental insight which tells me that it is relevant. Not that somebody has given this me as a stated need, but it's relevant because there's something that I've observed within the consumers that are relevant to me, and it tells me that this will fit in their life. So that's the first question I'd like to ask. The second question that I'd like to ask is that, can we deliver it, right? And by delivery, I mean price. By delivery, I mean distribution. By delivery, I mean legal compliance. By delivery, I mean after sales support. Extremely important question. So if it's again a box, I need to figure out that can I deliver it? What's the how I estimated demand? Can I deliver on that demand? How will it happen? So on and so forth. The third question is, have I identified what are the key barriers and challenges, right? At a customer level, at an environment level, at a distribution level, at a price level, and do I have a clear game plan on overcoming them? I think if these 3 or 4 questions are answered, then the process takes over. Then you've got to take this idea and do an in-market prototype, and you've got to really have your eyes and ears open and listen. And if you get a thumbs up, fantastic. If not, figure out what went wrong, make those changes and go back to the market again. And at a point where you feel that, I think I've cracked scalability issue, get into a market scale up and then follow it through a scale up. So to me, it's fundamentally about doing planning rigor and then a process rigor. So those are the questions that I would ask.
If you think about the section about scaling up that you mentioned, obviously you have, as a company, a lot of things already built in so that someone can use it to distribute products or something else. Do you have an essence, like a skunk works is the expression in the USA, but do you have an area of your business that is for the new ideas that don't really fit anywhere?
I'll give you an example, and that's very close to my heart. In our steel business, if you really look at, there is a section of the industry which is overserviced, and there is a section of the industry which is underserviced. So I'll take the underserviced. If you look at the box, the steel box that you and I have seen on Indian railway stations, it's pretty much remained the same over the last 30-40 years, and I haven't seen it change. If you look at the roofing, the steel that is used for roofing, it's pretty much has remained the same over the last, 20-30 years. So if you look at a desert cooler, you look at an Almara, there's pretty much no design intervention. And design intervention not only to look better, but design intervention to become, in a way to impact a customer life. So one of the platform that we've created is that we will invest in better design which deliver better living standard. And I must qualify, the word is not lifestyle, but living standard. So today if you were to lift a steel trunk, right, we'll have a pain in the back, the hands are going to hurt, but people like you and me actually use a trolley which actually walks along with us. So that's the over-serviced market, and somebody is constantly looking at how do I create the next trolley. So trolley earlier pulled along, now it travels along with you. The fabric is becoming lighter. I mean, there are so many things that are happening in that space that the poor trunk has stayed the way it was in the last 30-40 years. So we've actually set up a team, and we're working with the design consultants who actually specialize both in graphic and design. And we're working on 3 or 4 ideas, and one idea that is very close to my heart is in the roofing space. We went out of the market and said, let's sell more steel because roofs are made with thatch material or naturally available material. And steel is expensive than any other material. And we went with a standard marketeer mindset. We'll tell you the life of the steel, and the customer said, look, buddy, I don't have money to put this roof on. What are you talking about? When we ask the question slightly differently, that irrespective of the material of the roof, what is an unfulfilled expectation? He says, you know what, it does not allow sunlight. So whether it's made with thatch, it's made with steel, it's made with cement, I don't get natural sunlight, and therefore I have to burn a kerosene lamp. That kerosene cost me 18 rupees a day, right? So I'm living in this house, but I don't get any sunlight, and you and I have no problem with getting sunlight. So we've taken this project, we are saying that we'll bring sunlight into people's life, and therefore imagine a roof which has got a little hole at the top, and you have a polycarbonate transparent sheet which allows sunlight to come in. Now we are collaborating with people in the solar energy space to say that can we bring in a low cost solar energy solution which goes on top of the roof. Therefore during you have sunlight, and the evening the same sunlight is stored as form of energy, and a little light bulb comes on. So you start looking at this idea. This is not about selling steel. This is about actually getting involved with the consumers and finding something that is hugely relevant for them. So imagine a home where there is a roof but there is no light. Now imagine a home roof where there is sunlight, and in the night a fan or a light comes in which the consumer has never seen. And mind you, 18 rupees a day is what the customer is spending on kerosene. So if you multiply 18 by 30, it's 540 rupees a month. Now can we bring in microfinance and try and convert this into an EMI model? And suddenly this roof which seemed totally unaffordable actually becomes an affordable proposition with no extra cost, and actually delivers far more than just simple security. So I can walk through multiple ideas that we are currently working on. Now we don't have distribution for this. We are not in the solar space. We are not into polycarbonate. We make steel, and we make high quality steel, but we are not in the solution servicing space. So the team today is actually just about creating the environment. And if I go back to earlier what I said, the first thing was, what is the fundamental customer need? Is there a relevance for this need? Can the customer afford it? And therefore it can become scalable. All those questions need to be answered. And now we are going through the process of saying, we'll take it to a village and we'll actually prototype it. Let's understand how well it works, and then we'll do a market scale up.
May I ask you, I'd like to just ask you just to comment on something that we're doing and see what you think. We've taken IDEO's approach, which I'm sure you know.
I'm familiar with IDEO.
Okay, so IDEO. And since it is open and provided for us, and that's important for a university to have, because we are doing this as a service. So IDEO's human-centered design process. After that, we take a process-driven approach that MIT has developed on product design and development. But after that, for the scaling up section, we're still not really sure what intellectual property that is open and available for us, where we can use that for our students. What do you think would be the most?
Well, I would say that the question of scaling up, which means it could be perhaps around distribution, it could be around market reach. I would say what would work is really to co-create the idea. So if you were to bring in the human-centric approach of IDEO and bring in the process approach from MIT, if you are also able to find an answer that eventually what kind of a channel will it get distributed through, and you can actually bring that channel in and you co-create the whole idea. To be honest, professionals like me, We look at an idea, what returns can I get today, tomorrow, day after. We are so driven by our short-term agenda. And therefore, when the idea is ready and somebody presents it, then fitting it becomes very difficult. But if the principle of co-creation is followed, I think the chances that our idea will see scale up will be significantly enhanced.